Greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world. Usually when I start a broadcast, I usually start with the Black Channel's song or whatever you want to call it, but we don't have any time to waste on this. And tonight is, quite frankly, the single most important program that I've ever done. So, I don't want to waste any time. When I started doing this, I said years ago that they killed our fathers for doing less than we're doing today. With the Black Channel, with Intelligent Black Society, with reestablishing ourselves as African peoples. They killed our fathers for doing less. And unfortunately, as black people, rather than confronting the problem head on and dealing with it, we've had a bunch of people who have attempted to retreat behind a never-ending cascade of coping mechanisms, whereby which they attempt to pretend the problem simply doesn't exist. So they start attacking other black people who are calling out the problem. All of a sudden, you are the problem. I've also stated that we as black people, that your single mother, bastard, baby, hood rat, slut, mammy culture, tell me what positive thing it has ever produced. Because if it produced scientists and our intelligentsia, I'd have no problem with it. But instead, it becomes a place where you cultivate the ignorant and the dumb. And black people, ignorance is our greatest enemy because our enemies know everything about us, while we celebrate and congratulate knowing nothing about them. August 2017, couple of months ago, we all remember the date of infamy. In Charlottesville, Virginia, white supremacists calling themselves the alt-right held their infamous Unite the Right rally, where white supremacists and white extremists of all stripes basically had a march and convention in the middle of the streets. And predictably, they came for war, and that was exactly what emerged. That's what we all knew. What we did not know until just a couple of days ago is that 9 days before the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, a little over a week before that, the FBI was handing out this information report. And this report confirms literally everything that I've ever said. Now you're going to hear it directly from the source. It confirms literally everything that I've ever said about us in relation to the government, about what they know, about what they've seen. It's not enough to have some jackass say they know and see everything. Everything is a metaphor. Can you tell us specifically what they know? Most people can't. This place did for years. And tonight, your nerds, your real ones, and your intelligentsia are going to do the necessary work for our survival This is a place that discusses these things on a level, at a microscopic, analytical level that simply no one else can, while literally everyone else is going to speak about it in vague generalities. We are going to speak about it in analytical specifics down the line. I'd like to thank our brother, Jason Reed, for posting this, getting the actual PDF of this file that you can actually read it, because foreignpolicy.com is the one who wrote the story, that they got a hold of this report. And 9 days before white supremacists would unleash murder and mayhem in the streets, the Donald Trump administration and his FBI were sitting around passing around a report saying that the threat to America was not white supremacists. They've invented a brand new term out of whole cloth. A term that nobody ever heard of before Foreign Policy printed this. Brand new term. We don't even know what it means. And when you read the report, it becomes very clear. They don't actually even know how to define it. But it's a bad thing. Black identity extremist. Now, they chose their terms carefully. Because, you see, they would get laughed out of the room if they said black supremacist. Because then you would have to explain to people, what are black people supreme at? Other than avoiding white supremacy. Black people control nothing, we own nothing, we are at the bottom of the barrel of everything. What are we supreme over? So, no, you couldn't say that one. That'll get you laughed out of the room. Came up with a new one. You see, when you say white supremacy, you're saying that this person says, I'm supreme because I am white. I'm committing violence because I am supreme. And you are inferior, and that justifies my violence. Black identity extremists, what they're now trying to say is, well, if I say I'm black and identify as black, that justifies my extremism. That's what they're saying now, is that if you identify as black, then that's terrorism. That's what they're saying. So what they have done is say that basically any black person anywhere could be a terrorist now. Any black person anywhere. And when I read this report, you will see that it extends so far and its tendrils go out so wide in such a huge diameter that literally any black person anywhere could wind up being investigated, prosecuted, and jailed. This has gone way beyond it, but it precedes it way before now. What I'm going to do is something that no other person can, no other place can. They won't do that. Most of this is over their heads. No disrespect. But there's a reason that we have the Black channel, because it's the only place you can go into these things in depth. The title of this report is FBI Bureau of Investigation Intelligence Assessment. Now, first, I'm going to be stopping frequently through here so I can explain some of these things you're seeing. Intelligence assessment. Now, that's a term that you use for foreign entities. You don't use those types of terms for domestic entities. You use intelligence. Those are terms that you use in regard to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Russians. Not one person and not one thing mentioned in this assessment is foreign. Every single one of them is domestic. But they're letting you know, oh, as far as we're concerned, you're up there with Al-Qaeda. Now, ask if you compare to Al-Qaeda. What does Al-Qaeda do that we do? That's the question you have to ask. Where's the similarity? We're white, and we say so. So you are. Dated August 3rd, 2017. Title, UFOUO, Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers. Remember that word likely. Remember it. Because in this assessment, you all are about to learn things about the FBI and their methodology that you didn't know before tonight. Don't try to lie and pretend you did. You're about to learn things tonight about their methodology that you simply never heard before, because we had never been told. But the words that they use in this report have meaning, right down to the word likely. Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. And I want you to remember that word likely. Is it that important? Yes, it's that important. Unclassified / law enforcement sensitive. Executive summary, UFOUO. The FBI assesses it is very likely, and this one has likely with the number 2 next to it, which means it's annotated. FBI assesses it is very likely black identity extremists, parentheses, BIE, perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred by an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. Now, first of all, this is the new term, and in this report, it's capital B on black, capital I on identity, and capital E in extremist. So what they're basically doing is declaring that this is a new type of group, is what they're saying. They are declaring a new type of group. Right up there with the sovereign citizens and the Branch Davidians. They're declaring a new group, is what they're doing. By putting these letters in capitals on the initials, they're declaring a new group. They are officially declaring a new group with the acronym BIE. Now, before I go any further, because I don't want to lose this thought, you understand that these things were not chosen at random. A long time ago, they attempted to use the term black supremacists. As a matter of fact, the Southern Poverty Law Center still refers to Nation of Islam as black supremacists, for those of you who didn't know. Oh yeah, the SPLC. As far as they're concerned, the Nation of Islam is up there with the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nation. Now, the SPLC cannot explain what the Nation of Islam is supreme over, but that's what they claim. But what this is saying is BIE. I want you to think about this for a moment. I held a conference in 2015 in Chicago. What was it called? BE1. In our circles, we use the phrase BE repeatedly. It stands for Black Empowerment. But now they're telling you that if you see BE, why? That means black extremist. The other thing is, what is the number 1 in the Roman numerals? It's the letter I. The B-I-E. The B-1. E. B-1. Extremist. They want to make sure that when people see these acronyms, they're now going to try to steer this in a new direction. And they know you have to start planting seeds. So they're going to start planting seeds now. That's what they're going for. The report goes on to say, The FBI assess it is very likely this increase began following the August 9th, 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and the subsequent grand jury November 2014 declination, that means declining, refusing, to indict the police officers involved. And there was only one police officer indicted as far as I'm aware, but this is the FBI. This is the FBI now. The FBI assesses it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse against African Americans since then have continued to feed the resurgence in ideologically motivated violent criminal activity within the BIE movement. So now, as I told you, they're officially declaring that this is a movement that no one's heard of before now. No one has seen before now. No one has had a thought of or a conversation about before now. But they're declaring to the already established bigot, they're declaring, oh yeah, man, black identity. I mean, if you identify as a race, isn't that extremism? Now, the other thing is they are going to continue to use these terms throughout this report. When speaking about police violence, not one time do they acknowledge a single incident of police violence. Not a single time. Not even one. Not even one. Notice it says it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse. When they talk about the police, everything is alleged, perceived. But when they talk about black people, it is not alleged violence. Now, when they're talking about you, it's not alleged. With the police, anything you have a problem with, well, that's just your perception. That's just what you allege. But when it's us, it is, well, this is violence. This is premeditated violence. But yes, with the police, that's just what you think. Well, no, for you, no, it's not what we think. We don't think this, we know it. You're violent. No, what the police do, that's just your perception. Oh, but what you're doing, no, that's not our perception. This is the truth. You're just violent. This is violence. With the police, you have the perception that there is police abuse. Yeah, it's abuse. There is no police violence. Even if you were right, it's not violence, it's abuse. Even if you were correct that something wrong has happened, it's not violence, it's just abuse. That's the worst it is. It's just abuse. This is the predisposition that the FBI takes when dealing with black people. No wonder you can't get a civil rights indictment. And yes, Barack Obama also factors into this report. They specifically mention it. But you're hearing right now the attitude of the federal government and why you can't get a civil rights indictment on George Zimmerman, Michael Dunn. Yeah, we're going down the list. You can't get a civil rights indictment on any of them. Michael Slager, can't get one. You couldn't get it under Obama. You can't get it under Trump. So don't say it was just Donald Trump. You couldn't get it under Obama. You can't get it under Trump. Because any act of violence committed against black people is determined to be alleged, perceived, your opinion. But whatever they claim you feel about police, that's not an opinion. Oh, that's already a fact. There's no debate. Now, listen to this next part, because this is where they reference us. The FBI assesses it is very likely, and remember these terms, likely and very likely, some BIEs are influenced by a mix of anti-authoritarian, Moorish sovereign citizen ideology, and BIE ideology. There you go. Now that is everybody who is against white supremacy. That was everyone. For those of you who don't know what the term anti-authoritarian means, who's the authority? White supremacists. So by definition, every single one of us that is against white supremacy, they have now declared you are an extremist because you are against the authority. You're against the Michael Slagers. You're against the Darren Wilsons. You're against the killers on the Baton Rouge Police Department. You're against that. You're an extremist. You're a terrorist. Because you're against that. Now notice, not one time in this report do they attempt to say that the police were in the right. At no time do they ever say that. But they do acknowledge that if you have a problem with the police, you're in the wrong. And if you see black people being murdered, you're in the wrong. Now, they don't ever say the police were right, but if you're against abuse, you're wrong. And now they've sat here and told you, anti-authoritarian, that's all of us. Moorish sovereign citizen. Have you ever heard of a government document that has acknowledged black people as Moors? Can someone name for me the last government document, government conference, government entity that formally acknowledges black people as Moors? I'll wait for that one. Show me any document anywhere that has ever acknowledged that before now. Before reading this assessment, when did you see that? And then BIE ideology. So it says that they're likely the BIEs are influenced by authoritarian, Moorish sovereign citizen, and BIE ideology. Well, who out there identifies themselves as BIE? No one identifies themselves as BIE. They only identify themselves as black empowerment and black identity. So you can't say that black identity extremists are also influenced by BIE ideology as if they're separate things. No one is a BIE ideology adherent before you mention this report. So you're talking about someone else. You can't be talking about the BIEs since you said the BIEs are influenced by these other things. So they're talking about something else when they say BIE. Yeah, they're talking in a schizophrenic way, but they want you to know the problem is BIE extremists are influenced by anybody who promotes black identity. That's who. So the BIE extremists are being motivated by black identity people. Now, the next sentence. The FBI has high confidence in these assessments based on a history of violent incidents attributed to individuals who acted on behalf of their ideological beliefs, documented in FBI investigations and other law enforcement and open source reporting. The FBI makes this judgment with the key assumption the recent incidents are ideologically motivated. Now, I said recent. 2014 is recent? Okay. Now, here's the part that other people will not go into because they cannot, their eyes glaze over. But the Black Channel makes sure that you are fully informed. This is the annotations at the bottom of this first page to the terms that they used on this first page. These are the annotations. I'm going to go straight to the ones that matter. Remember that when I said likely and most likely, we'll get to that later. The second one is the FBI. The FBI defines black identity extremists as individuals who seek, wholly or in part, through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society, and some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. This desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either a religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. The mere advocacy of political or social positions, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, or generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute extremism and may be constitutionally protected. Brothers and sisters, they got all of us in that one. That's all of us. That is every single person listening to me. That was all of us. It doesn't matter if you're Nation of Islam, Moorish Temple, the Sultans down there on 125th Street. It doesn't matter who you are. This is every single one of us. Did you get that one? This is all of us. The FBI defines black identity extremists as individuals who seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society. How many of us do not see racism and injustice in American society? How many of us don't see that? How many? They're saying that if you perceive racism and injustice in American society, we're talking about you. Quote, and some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. People, do you understand what that sentence meant? A separate black homeland. Well, that's Africa. Now, some of you may, well, no, some of the cowardly niggas are going to jump up. No, they talking about if you want to, like, take over Atlanta or something. What does the phrase take over mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? No, they're talking about anywhere. A separate black homeland. That's anywhere. Or autonomous black social institutions. Yeah, I want some autonomous black social institutions like our own financial institutions. We need our own banks. We need our own co-ops. We need our own educational infrastructures like the Jews have and like the Mormons have and like the Arabs have. Hell yeah, I want some autonomous black institutions. And the FBI just said, well, that's terrorism. So for these other people, that's not terrorism. The Mormons moving to Utah and declaring a Mormon state, and Harry Reid and Mitt Romney and a bunch of other politicians currently sitting in office, those white men are not terrorists for being part of a separate Mormon social government and institution inside America. But you and me, we're the terrorists. Those guys aren't, but we're the terrorists. Chinatown is not terrorism, but black people saying we want our own independent social institutions, that has been officially declared terrorism by the FBI. They're no longer hiding it now. If you don't want to shop at white-owned stores, if you want to have your own banks and your own schools and your own social institutions and your own universities, then you are a terrorist. This report just said it. I'll read it again if you missed it. That people who do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. So when Dr. Claude Anderson talks about having a black city council or a black commission, they're telling you now that a black city council is determined to be terrorism. You're an extremist if you talk about having a black city council. Having your own black city government is now officially declared terrorism and extremism by the FBI. No wonder the state of Michigan passed their emergency finance manager law, and 9 of the 11 cities that they took over were black. Even though black people are a minority of Michigan's population, they passed the emergency finance manager law and then started taking over the black cities. Because a majority black government is considered to be an extremist and terrorist entity. And now the FBI is confirming it. No wonder they make so many moves. No wonder they ran Dr. Anderson out of Detroit on a rail. Oh yeah, and it didn't help you, did it, Kwame Kilpatrick? You played their game, you danced to their tune, you did their bidding, and they put you in prison forever anyway. How well did that work out for you, Kwame? Turning on your people in favor of those guys. How well did it work out for you, Kwame? Now, the next sentence, the desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either a religious or political belief system. So you and I saying we want separation from injustice, that's not called common sense or survival. It's, well, this is a religion or a political stunt. This is just politics. It isn't survival. Because you see, if they say it's survival, then you have to acknowledge, well, what are they trying to survive? Now, they're letting you know, yeah, you're being brutalized, but we're going to try to say your motives are something else. And then it adds this part, is based on either a religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. Please name for me one group of folk who are saying they want to separate from American society because they see themselves as supreme. Show me one group of people in black society who's declaring that. Show it to me. I'll wait. I'll wait. I'm going to skip over this next addendum because it talks about sovereign citizens. But going on to the next page. This intelligence assessment focuses on individuals with BIE ideological motivations who have committed targeted, premeditated attacks against law enforcement officers since 2014. So, with the police, they can't give you any stats. Now, you all do know that, don't you? The federal government does not actually keep stats on police murders of black people. Of police murders, period. They don't keep any statistics at all. They've got recommendations. They've got records on every citizen arrested for a crime. They don't keep any records at all on police violence against black people. But they do keep records of anything that they say, that they claim is an action against police. Now they're on top of it. And you're about to hear in this report all kinds of things. This assessment does not address BIEs who have attacked law enforcement officers during the course of officers' routine duties, such as responding to calls and traffic stops in which violent actions were reactionary in nature. This assessment addresses the following key intelligence questions. 1. To what extent are BIEs targeting interests retaliatory? And 2. What cross-programmatic relationships influence the BIE movement? ULES. This assessment is the first FBI analytic intelligence product to assess influences between the sovereign citizen extremist movement and the black identity extremist movement. Now, what is this telling you is this is the first FBI assessment that is looking at connecting the dots or claiming, should we say that this is claiming, because I don't believe for a second that this was leaked accidentally. I think this was leaked deliberately because they want white society to have a talking point to say, see, anybody who is against white supremacy and white violence against black people, well, you're the same as the Aryan Nation. Well, we can't be the same as Aryan Nation. Why not? Because we're not marching down the streets attacking people. Doesn't matter. If you feel a certain way, we'll just say that that's black supremacy. So this has been leaked so that white people can say, see, these people are just like you. Only bad. It goes on to say the FBI has previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in 2 products. So that means that there were 2 previous reports before now supposedly saying that there were BIEs, black identity extremists, both of which had findings consistent with this assessment. Now listen to the next sentence, people, because this shows how dumb a lot of you are. The March 23rd, 2016 FBI intelligence bulletin titled UFOUO Black Separatist Extremists Call for Retaliation in Response to Police-Involved Incidents Could Incite Acts of Violence Against Law Enforcement. March 23rd, 2016. Who was president in March of 2016? Before you sit up here and say, yeah, that's right, that old racist Trump, he the one doing this. This Donald Trump. Who was president in they said that they had 2 previous reports, which means that they had already started saying that black identity extremists is something we need to look at. 2 previous reports before now. 2016, Donald Trump wasn't in the FBI. That wasn't Donald Trump's FBI. That was Obama's. That was Obama's. And by the way, 2016 is not the first time they watched it. Yeah. I definitely believe that this report was leaked. So that if we tried to say it's Trump, he lets you know, oh, no. See, this was Obama. This isn't racially motivated. This was Obama who did it. James Comey got booed out of Howard. Now you know why. I guess he was trying to test if we remember or not, or if we know. Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know. (2016), but it doesn't stop there. The March 23rd, 2016 FBI Intelligence Bulletin assessed incidents involving allegations. Notice they never say involving law enforcement abuse. Everything is allegations. Everything. Not one time do they acknowledge that police have ever committed an act of violence against black people. Every single thing is allegations. You allege, you perceive, you think, you claim. But not one of the offenses against black people is confirmed or labeled real. Now, anything they say happened to police, that's real. But not one time do they acknowledge anything has actually even happened to us. They're claiming nothing's happened. This is just all in your head, nigga. They assessed the incidents involving allegations of law enforcement abuse and related legal proceedings would likely lead to BSE calls for violent retaliation and incite these domestic extremists to commit violent acts against law enforcement. Now, in 2016, did you hear what they called it? Black separatist extremists. So Barack Obama, the magic mulatto, who spent his entire life despising black people, which is why Tom Daschle knew that this was their man to push for the White House, because he hates black people as much as Tom Daschle and Donald Trump do. No wonder he gets along with every racist you can name just fine. He doesn't get along with black people that well. Barack Obama hates black people as much as white supremacists do. And he called it black separatists. Trump's FBI has come back and said, we got to redo this propaganda. Black separatist is a little too vague. We need something with some more teeth in it. Goes on to say the November 14th, 2014 intelligence bulletin. Yeah, we're in 2017, but they released one in 2016 and released one in 2014. That means that they were watching all of this as soon as the Ferguson uprising happened. They were watching it and on top of it as soon as the Ferguson uprising occurred. Because remember, November 2014, that's when they let Darren Wilson go. And the FBI released an intelligence assessment then titled Potential Criminal Reactions to Missouri Grand Jury Announcement. So before they go any further, it's potential criminal reactions. 2014. Who was president of the United States in 2014, people? And I ask you, have you ever heard Rachel Maddow or any of these other so-called good white liberals who have access to a whole lot more information than we do, or that foreignpolicy.com does? Have any of them ever mentioned this assessment before you all heard that, by the way, there was an FBI assessment in 2014 while you were in the streets in Ferguson, but telling Barack Obama that we need to indict Darren Wilson? His FBI was saying that you were potentially going to have a criminal reaction to the verdict. Not that the FBI tactics to indict suspected white supremacist elements in law enforcement, we're still waiting for that FBI assessment. But they got one that says black folks are criminal if they don't like a jury verdict. This was while you were in the streets, while the jury was reading the verdict. They were already saying, now here's what we gonna do about these niggas. We're already sizing you up. The November 2014 assessment assessed the announcement of the grand jury's decision in the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson would likely be exploited by some individuals to justify threats and attacks against law enforcement and critical infrastructure. Next page. There was an addendum on that one, but I'm skipping over that. Next page. UFOUO, suspects' grievances very likely lead to violent targeting of law enforcement. The FBI judges it is very likely, BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans, have become organizing drivers for the BIE movement since 2014, resulting in a spike of BIEs intentionally targeting law enforcement with violence. In all 6 targeted attacks since 2014, the FBI assesses it is very likely the BIE suspects acted in retaliation for perceived past police brutality incidents. Even though 5 of these attacks occurred following controversial police shootings of African Americans by white police officers, BIE targeting of officers was not in every incident based on their specific race. Now, people, what they're about to do next, this next part, they go in detail. In this next part, they go step by step, incident by incident. Now, you know what you think about incidents involving police officers where they claim black people shot them. There's no proof whatsoever, by the way. No proof at all. but they claim it happened. They perceive that there were killings of police officers. They perceive it. They claim it, they think it. But we don't have any proof. You know what you think about them. Now, listen to what they have to say. And by the way, they list the incidents. By the way, they list it. I want you to hear what they think. Now, this report says, on July 7th, 2016, Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers. Wait a minute, don't you mean allegedly? Micah Johnson allegedly, we perceived that Michael Johnson allegedly attacked. Now it says ambushed. Micah Johnson ambushed and shot. Whoa, once you say somebody shot somebody, isn't it enough? Once you say he ambushed him, isn't it enough? Why didn't you just say Micah Johnson allegedly? What happened to the word allegedly all of a sudden? Because you have no proof. So what happened to the word allegedly? Why isn't it alleged anymore? Like I said, when they get to talking about us, ain't gonna be no mental health, ain't gonna be no we think, ain't gonna be no we allege. It is, oh nigga, you did it. For the police, well, you allege it. For them, you guilty. Micah Johnson was never tried. So anything you say about him is alleged. He was never tried. You never gave him the opportunity to be. He was alleged. It's alleged that Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas, during a First Amendment protected protest before being ultimately killed by police. You know, with their flying robot gun. Remember, they used military hardware against Micah Johnson in violation of posse comitatus, by the way. Sheer violation. They used military weaponry against him. Sheer violation. And that's not alleged. It goes on to say the 5 deceased officers were white. The planned public event was protesting recent officer-involved shootings of African Americans in Louisiana and Minnesota. Based on Johnson's journal writings and statements to police, he appeared to have been influenced by BIE ideology. Now, folks, did you hear this? The 5 deceased police officers were white. Are they going to say anything about Lauren Aaron? Remember, he was the white cop in Dallas who had white supremacist tattoos. Remember? Now, this report never mentions Lauren Aaron even once. Why didn't it even say Micah Johnson allegedly killed 5 police officers, including 1 with suspected white supremacist ties and who had white supremacist tattoos and markings? Why didn't they say that he had white supremacist iconography tattooed on himself? He had white supremacist symbols. Why didn't they say that? Micah Johnson killed 5 police officers, including 1 who had white supremacist tattoo symbols. Wouldn't that have been a complete and thorough report of what happened in Dallas? Oh yeah, because if you say that, then Micah Johnson doesn't seem like an extremist anymore. Because you see, you're only an extremist if the threat isn't real. You're not an extremist if you proved that the threat was real. Micah Johnson proved that at least 20% of the Dallas Police Department is confirmed white supremacist and half of it is potential. Because you could pick any 5 police officers at random and they will be white supremacists. He proved that in a very unfortunate real-world exercise, he allegedly proved it. That you could pick any 5 white police officers at random and you will get an overt white supremacist. But the FBI report does not mention this. Now, listen to what they say next. This is their note on Micah Johnson. During the standoff, and tell me if any of you heard of any of this before now. During the standoff with police, Johnson told police negotiators, so he was in communication with police, now we find out. He told police negotiators he was upset about recent police shootings and white people and expressed a desire to kill white people, especially white officers. Johnson searched and liked social media pages of BIE and black separatist groups and had been ousted from a local BIE group for being too radical, according to an open source news article. Now, folks, first of all, we don't have any proof of this whatsoever. This is what they say. They say that Micah Johnson had a problem with police and white people. We don't have any independent confirmation whatsoever that he ever spoke to the police that night. All you got is them saying, take our word for it. We talked to him and he said he was after the police and white folks. So this is the crazy nigga with a gun story. That's what this is. Crazy nigga with a gun. Now, they go on to say black identity, BIE groups, and black separatist groups. They don't name them, but BIE groups. In other words, anybody we name. What is a BIE group? Anybody we say is. Because as you saw before, they make the definition so broad and ambiguous that literally anybody would qualify. Anybody. Next, now this is one many of you may have forgotten about. On October 23rd, 2014, Zale Thompson attacked 4 white New York Police Department officers in Queens with a hatchet. One officer received injuries to the arm and the second officer received an injury to the side of the head. The 2 remaining NYPD officers at the scene shot and killed Thompson, according to open source reporting. Now, listen to this next part, because I remember this incident, but they didn't say anything about this guy after it. It didn't make any headlines. They buried this story after this. And this next part, you're about to hear things, many of you are about to hear stuff about this from the first time. If you remember that hatchet incident, much of this you're going to hear for the first time. The story says, their assessment says, according to open source reporting, Thompson was angered after, quote, a recent spate of deaths at the hands of police, end quote. In his own writings, Thompson advocated for armed struggle against, quote, the oppressors and mass revolt against the U.S. social, economic, and political systems which he perceived to be, quote, white dominated. Now, do you hear that? It just said the American social order that he perceived to be white dominated. Okay, is there anybody here saying that the American government, American banking, and American schools are not white dominated? Do you know how crazy and out of your mind you have to be to sit up here and say that 5 + 5 = 10, but that's just your perception? 99% of the United States government is white, but the FBI says it's only your perception that American society is white dominated. This is how far these bastards are going, that in their legal documents, they will not even acknowledge mathematics. They're gonna sit here and play stupid on everything. Everything. Who in the world can argue that the U.S. social, economic, and political systems are white dominated? Who can argue against that? Who in the world can argue against it? Apparently, the FBI says, well, I mean, that's your perception, but that's not a fact, though. I mean, you perceive it that way, but that's not a fact. It's not a demonstrable empirical fact. That's your perception that the media and the schools and the banks and the government and law enforcement and everything else, that's your perception that they are white dominated. Your perception. You just think it. Now you all know why you cannot get your discrimination lawsuits, police indicted. Now you know why you can't get it. This is the position of the United States government. And it's not new. It's not new. It goes on to say he also described the United States as a, quote, beast and called for chopping off its head, hands, and feet. Now, there's a reason that they included this phrase beast. We all remember KRS-One when he made that song. Whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the police. Whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the beast. And folk have been using it ever since. They're the beast. So now what they're doing is they're officially acknowledging that the pronouns and metaphors that you use for white supremacy, they are now trying to put this into the American lexicon at large, so that when you say the beast, why, you're an extremist, because you claim that it's the beast. Yeah, that's that black identity down there in Alabama. Yeah, that's that black identity extremist talk there. I knows that there's talk. That's that black identity extremist. I read that from the FBI once. Those people like to talk about they the beast. They talking about all Americans is beasts. I ain't got no damn tail. I ain't no livestock. I ain't no beast. Hand me my damn Confederate flag, Martha. I'm going to the NASCAR. It goes on to say NYPD observed tattoos on Thompson's body that indicated he was affiliated with a black separatist extremist group, and pocket litter indicating he may have been associated with another black separatist group, according to law enforcement reporting. Now, where that's concerned, I'm trying to check on that. Sources, law enforcement reporting. So they don't, in this assessment, they don't actually state or prove it. They're just saying, well, take it from us. According to law enforcement, he had tattoos that indicated to us that he was a member of a black extremist group, of a separatist extremist group. He had tattoos that identified him. Take our word for it. The next thing here says, convergence of BIE and Moorish sovereign citizen ideology very likely leads to violence against law enforcement officers. The FBI assesses it is very likely a few of the BIEs who have targeted law enforcement since 2014 were influenced by more than one ideological perspective. The FBI judges it is very likely in 4 of the 6 BIE attacks against law enforcement since 2014, the perpetrators were motivated by a mix of BIE ideology and Moorish sovereign citizen extremist ideology, a category of SCE, that's sovereign citizen extremist ideology. The FBI assesses it is very likely BIE adoption of a Moorish SCE, sovereign citizen extremist identity, reinforced a sense of disenfranchisement from society and a perception that the criminal justice system is unjust. That somebody at the FBI could have said that, could have typed that last sentence with a straight face is simply a marvel. It is simply a marvel that anybody could have made that last sentence with a straight face. That is simply a marvel that that could have been done. That you would sit here and say it's a perception that the criminal justice system is unjust. The Justice Department releases reports every damn year proving it, but the FBI says it's your perception. They couldn't even say disenfranchisement from society and inequities in the criminal justice system. They will not acknowledge in any form, way, shape, or manner, and this goes back to Barack Obama, they would not acknowledge in any way, form, shape, or manner that there is any type of injustice in the American courts. None whatsoever. That if the court says it, it is right. It is always right. It is always correct, unless it's O.J. Simpson. Now, if it's O.J., it's wrong. And we need a mulligan. So if it's O.J. Simpson, that's wrong. But for the rest of you, it's right. We're right. Except if one of you gets off, then it's wrong. Then the system is broken. Might not be unjust, but it's broken. But the system otherwise is perfect. Zero mistakes. Never been a wrong verdict of any kind. Never been. Don't worry about those videos we got over there. Don't worry about that. If the judge says that's not what happened, then your video is just your perception. You know, you perceived that Michael Slager gunned down Walter Scott in the back as he ran. No weapons, no threat. You perceived it. You perceived it. It's your perception that Patrick Harmon was shot in the back and murdered on police body cam. They got this one on body cam. He ran, he had no weapons. He was clearly running, and the police, after he got 10 feet away or so, he was running, they were running after him, and one of the cops just opened fire, shot him in the back, dead. But that's not really what happened. That's just your perception that that's what happened. You see, what really happened was, as he was running, the police officer fired his gun, but the guns were taken over by alien entities who swung the bullets around, and they went in their own trajectory, and they just happened to go straight into the back of Patrick Harmon. So do you all realize they are saying that there is no act of violence against black people that is actually acknowledged as an act of violence? Anything that happens to us is simply your perception. And the courts are proving that it's just your opinion, but it's not a fact. It gives notes on October 4th and October 13th of 2016, an individual allegedly shot at 2 different police stations in Indianapolis, Indiana. The subject left a handwritten note at the scene of one of the shootings in which he identified himself as a Moor and made anti-white statements. The subject posted pictures on social media of African-American men carrying assault rifles behind text calling for social injustice and retribution. Okay, that doesn't seem quite right there. They must have meant to say that you meant to say calling out social injustice. The subject was later involved in a shootout with police during his arrest on related charges, according to law enforcement reporting. On July 17, 2016, Gavin Eugene Long ambushed and shot 6 law enforcement officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, allegedly, before eventually being killed by police. The deceased victims included 1 African-American officer and 1 white officer from the Baton Rouge Police Department. and one white officer from the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. Long had expressed black separatist rhetoric both on social media and in his manifesto, including rants against, quote, crackers, and reference to an African-American male killed by police in Baton Rouge on July 5th, 2016. In his manifesto, Long expressed his frustrations with the police and criminal justice system in the United States and saw his actions, quote, as a necessary evil in order to create substantial change. A law enforcement search of Long's laptop contained biographical information and residential addresses of 2 officers involved in the Alton Sterling shooting. There were only 2 officers involved. You see how this I'm breaking in here. Do you see how this assessment keeps trying to make it seem like there were way more people at the scene than there were? They know that Darren Wilson was the only person involved with, well, beyond the police department when they colluded later. But he was the only one there. There were only 2 officers who murdered Alton Sterling. But they're trying to make it seem like there were even more. No, there were only 2. And the media, has the media ever identified who those officers were, by the way? Have any of you ever seen a news article that identified who those 2 officers are? Because we've never heard anything else after it. They murdered Alton Sterling and nothing. Has anybody seen them identify who the killers were? Just asking. A law enforcement search of Long's laptop contained biographical information and residential addresses of 2 officers involved in the Alton Sterling shooting, and Google search directions to one of the officers' home addresses. Long had also declared himself to be a Moor, had changed his, quote, slave name to the Moorish name Cosmo Asar Setapinra, and was carrying a Moorish identification card at the time of his death, according to open source reporting. They say time of his death. Don't you mean the time of his killing? They might not say murder. Why didn't they say the time of his killing? So the police are ambushed and shot. Gavin Long is just killed. He's just dead. He's not even killed. He's just dead. He's just walking along. Police showed up. He just dropped dead. Oh, amazing. Crazy how that works. Crazy. Now, did you notice what they said there also? Said that Long had declared himself to be a Moor. Now, why would you include this in this report? What's wrong with being a Moor? What's wrong with that? What they're telling you is, this is off by itself. That Long also declared himself to be a Moor and was carrying a Moorish identification card at the time of his death. So what they're saying in no uncertain terms is that if you identify yourself as a Moor, the FBI regards you as a terrorist. At first they were saying it had to be linked to an actual crime. Now they're saying that no. Just say, if you identify as a Moor, that's a trigger. That's a flag. Soon as you say you're a Moor, that's a flag. And they're letting you know this is not new. Every time that because if you say that you're a Moor, or if you say that you're an African, by definition, you are saying that I am psychologically migrating away from white dominance and control. You are now an open threat. This is one of the defective Negroes. He's fighting the programming. He's not going along with it. He's not going to get up every morning and be content to let the status quo remain the status quo. Soon as you say those types of things that say that you identify yourself as something other than what the American social order has determined you are to be, a good little nigger, once you declare that, they're letting you know now, any of us who openly declare that we're not a part of what they're doing, you're a threat. So in case before you were under the misconception that when they use those terms that they had to be linked to a violent act, this last part here lets you know, oh no, he said he was a Moor. That has nothing to do with what he did. He said he was a Moor. He said he had a Moorish identification card. And that's the problem. That's the problem. These aren't my words, these are theirs. On September 13, 2016, an individual reportedly intentionally drove his vehicle toward 3 white officers with the police department in Phoenix, Arizona outside the gas station, striking 2 of them before he was arrested. The subject's social media accounts indicated that he was tied to a BIE group and a Moorish group, and that he was angry over police shootings since at least the killing of Brown in 2014. Consistent with BIE statements on social media, the subject stated, quote, "The Caucasian needs to be slaughtered like the pigs they are, right along with the niggas who serve and protect them," according to law enforcement reporting. Now, once again, I am bringing you back to this. Do you realize that they once again said that the problem with this guy was that he was tied to a BIE group and a Moorish group? Now, black identity extremist, okay, if you're going to phrase it like that, maybe that's a problem. They're saying that simply his being a part of a Moorish group, we're back to Moor again. Since when was it wrong, extremist or radical, to identify yourself as a Moor? They're telling you now, they are officially saying that any person who identifies himself as a Moor is according to the FBI, you are regarded as a terrorist threat simply for identifying as a Moor. Doesn't matter what you do. So what else does this tell us? That tells you that the FBI is monitoring everything. They're monitoring your black Moorish groups. They're monitoring the Moorish Science Temple. They got agents and infiltrators. They're watching your Facebook groups, your Twitter feeds, your Instagram. They're watching everything. If you're a member of one of those groups, or if you have been there, because many of you are not familiar with FBI procedure, let me take a brief moment to remind you, because I studied how they took down John Gotti. It was fascinating. But one of the things that the FBI and the New York Police Department made very clear was that during their surveillance of that nightclub, of that club that John Gotti and his friends went to, they photographed and recorded and logged information on each and every single person who set foot in it. Was that the Ravenite? I think it was. I think the name of it was the Ravenite. Doesn't really matter. You can look it up for yourself, but I think it was the Ravenite. They made photographs, took pictures and surveillance of every single person who went in. That included the mobsters, the mob associates, the mob wannabes, the mob families, the mob friends, the legitimate employees of the club, the legitimate ones, the ones who had no mob associations, affiliations, ties, or anything. They took pictures and cataloged all of them too. Now, this wasn't accidental. They deliberately said, even though this person is not one, we're taking pictures of everybody. The legitimate customers who went into the club, they took pictures of all of them. They even said that they took pictures of the Coca-Cola and the Budweiser delivery people. They took pictures of potato chip and chocolate bar candy vendors. They took pictures of the delivery people. They took pictures of every single person who walked in there. Don't believe me? Go read the book Underboss by Peter Maas. Peter, M-A-A-S. Go read the book yourself. They took pictures of everyone. Even if you went there as a customer. Now, we already know that Facebook works arm in arm with the FBI. They're giving information to them about Russia. They've been giving information about you, and that means everybody who joins the Moors, everybody who joins my group, they've got all of you, your IP addresses, your home, your names, your family. They've got a big spider web, and you're all on it. Even if you don't join the group, the fact you visited is a trigger. The fact you might even passingly be interested, that's a trigger. It has an addendum down here at the annotation at the bottom that says, Moorish sovereign citizens are a loose network of mostly African Americans who believe they are sovereign entities who do not recognize the authority of the U.S. government. Moorish sovereign citizen ideology derives from the Moorish Science Temple of America, a non-violent religious and cultural movement founded in 1913 by Noble Drew Ali, who taught his followers they were not, quote, Negroes, but Moors, people of North African, Berber, and Arab descent. Some Moorish adherents adopt sovereign citizen strategies to assert diplomatic immunity by claiming membership in fictitious Native American tribes, claiming descent from settlers who arrived in North America during the pre-Columbian era. Me interjecting, remember Ivan Van Sertima's book, They Came Before Columbus. Remember Dr. Sertima's book. The FBI is letting you know, oh, we know your reading list. We know it. We know your reading list. They arrived before Columbus. Yeah, we know it. Yeah, we got that one on our bookshelf too, for different reasons. Or identifying as foreign nationals or ambassadors. Once again, this comes from another FBI source, FBI Primer, January 2014. By the way, January 2014, this was before Mike Brown. So at the beginning of 2014, Barack Obama was 2 years into his second term as president, and the FBI was already declaring that anyone who identifies as a Moor is a threat. Second year. This was before the killing of Mike Brown. So being as a Moor, you were already on the radar. You've been there. You've been there. They already got it. Next section, perspective. BIEs have historically justified and perpetrated violence against law enforcement, which they perceived as representative of the institutional oppression of African Americans, but had not targeted law enforcement with premeditated violence for nearly 2 decades, leading up to the lethal incidents observed beginning in 2014. BIE violence peaked in the 1960s and 1970s in response to changing socioeconomic attitudes and treatment of blacks during the civil rights movement. BIE groups such as the Black Liberation Army, which was created in the early 1970s to, quote, take up arms for the liberation and self-determination of black people in the United States, engaged in murders, bank robberies, kidnappings, racketeering, possession of explosives, and weapons smuggling. From 1970 to 1984, the BLA was involved in at least 38 criminal incidents, including 26 armed assaults, 3 assassinations, 4 bombings, 4 hijackings, and a partridge in a pear tree, and hostage takings. Almost half of these attacks took place in predominantly African-American neighborhoods and targeted law enforcement officers without regard to their race, according to an open-source database. BIE violence has been rare over the past 20 years, and there is sparse evidence of any convergence with SCEs who adhere to Moorish beliefs, who have historically engaged in nonviolent fraudulent schemes, including production of fraudulent personal identification documents such as international motorist certifications, passport, vehicle titles and registrations, and birth certificates in support of their claims of sovereignty. Now, understand something. The white sovereign citizen groups are white supremacists, and they're trying to make some connections to say that white supremacist sovereign citizens may also be working with Moorish sovereigns. This is insanity. It's as if Donald Trump actually learned how to read above a 5th grade level and speak above a 5th grade level and typed a report. It's sheer, swirling, mixed up fantasy and bullcrap. This is absolute garbage. It's made up. But they're stating every single part of it as fact. It goes on to say, in addition, although non-Moorish SCEs have committed lethal violence against law enforcement in the past, the violence has typically occurred in response to encounters with law enforcement, for example, during traffic stops or the issuing of warrants, rather than through premeditated targeted aggression. In addition, not all self-identified Moors are sovereign citizens, and not all sovereign citizen Moors engage in violence against law enforcement or other illegal activity. Now, they can say this in this damn report, but that's not going to save your ass when they start indicting. They're going to say that the fact you identify as a Moor, that means that alone qualifies you as violent. That's what they're telling you. They're saying that to you now. The FBI had previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in 2 products. That's 2 assessments. I covered those before. This intelligence assessment addresses actual incidents of lethal retaliatory violence. The previous Black Identity Extremism Intelligence products discussed calls for potential retaliatory violence, not actual violent incidents. Recent lethal violent incidents may be indicative of a resurgence of targeted violence within the BIE movement. So for those of you who are not aware that there was a BIE movement, Donald Trump is here to tell you that that Black identity is extremism and that it is a movement. Analysis of alternatives. The FBI considered the alternate hypothesis that retaliatory violence against law enforcement is not ideologically motivated, but rather a result that some individuals may simply harbor animosity toward police and exploit racial tensions as an excuse to commit acts of violence. Now, do you understand what that sentence means? Most of you do not understand what that sentence means by itself. Fortunately, you have the Black channel here to interpret it. The FBI considered the alternative hypothesis, that's the alternative suggestion or guess, that retaliatory violence against law enforcement is not ideologically motivated. That is, that you didn't come to it by way of a group of people or a set of people coming to the same intellectual conclusion, but rather a result that some individuals may simply harbor animosity toward police and exploit racial tensions as an excuse to commit acts of violence. So what they're saying is lone wolf. That there are some individuals who they just have a bone to pick with law enforcement, and that they're going off acting on their own. They're claiming that they're part of some Moorish or Black separatist, or what you're calling Black separatists. What they're saying here is, oh no, nigga, ain't no such thing as a lone wolf. Oh no, you're not just individuals who that this is a one-off and that you're unconnected. They're saying here that they are ruling out the idea that you're disconnected. Oh no, nigga, if you shot a cop, you're part of a larger scheme. You're connected. They're letting you know right now, oh no, you don't get to claim lone wolf. You're not by yourself. Absolutely not. You're not just one person who got ticked off. You know, like Stephen Paddock in Las Vegas, that they're still claiming they don't know what his motive was. Timothy McVeigh, oh, he was by himself. He just had a bone to pick with the American government. It was not part of a larger white supremacist ideology. Did you get that? You see, with Timothy McVeigh, even though he said it was about Ruby Ridge, and even though he associated with white supremacists, and even though he had a copy of the Turner Diaries, which is a white supremacist manifesto, the FBI has always contended that Timothy McVeigh was just by himself and had a general bone to pick with the federal government, but that this was not part of a larger ideological movement. FBI is telling you that where these black folk are involved, oh hell no, this is part of a larger ideological movement. No, you're not an individual who's just upset with law enforcement. There's an ideological movement afoot. There's an ideological movement that's going on right now. And we want to make sure that we get all of you caught up in that dragnet. Ain't no getting out of it. Ain't no, I was by myself. Ain't no, well, this is my personal ideology. This is my personal belief. This is my personal reaction. In other words, every black person in America is at least potential and most likely proven. Everybody. Everyone. It goes on to say the FBI, however, now after saying all that, the FBI, however, assesses this alternative is very unlikely. In the cases analyzed in this assessment, because strictly criminal subjects typically commit spontaneous defensive acts of violence against police rather than proactive targeting, and use idiosyncratic reasons unrelated to ideology. For those of you who don't know, idiosyncratic simply means individual, such as financial gain and personal disputes to justify their actions. The FBI further judges it is very likely BIEs proactively target police and openly identify and justify their actions with social political agendas commensurate with their perceived injustices against African Americans, and in some cases their identified affiliations with violent extremist groups. Outlook. The FBI assesses it is very likely that BIE's perception of unjust treatment of African Americans and the perceived unchallenged illegitimate actions of law enforcement will inspire premeditated attacks against law enforcement over the next year. This may also lead to an increase in BIE group memberships, collaboration among BIE groups, or the appearance of additional violent lone offenders motivated by BIE rhetoric. So what they're telling you is that we're saying now that there's going to be an increase of police being killed by black people for their racist actions. This was 9 days before white supremacists went marching through Charlottesville, Virginia, and blew this entire assessment's position to hell. The opinion of this assessment got blown to kingdom come in one afternoon in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's why this report was never officially released. Because they wanted to, and then Charlottesville happened and they realized, man, we're going to look like prize-winning asshats if we send this out. No way do we send this out. Now that the subject has turned to white supremacy, Donald Trump went out there and told you what he told the FBI. These are very fine people. These are very fine people. Very fine. Now, I want to deal with this next part, where it says that this may lead to an increase in BIE group memberships, collaboration among BIE groups, or the appearance of additional violent lone offenders motivated by BIE rhetoric. Now, first of all, about collaborations. I have been calling for collaborations now for well over 3 years. And I've essentially been flatly denied by pretty much everybody you can name. And I've openly asked, and they've openly refused. And this is the result of their refusal. This report. They don't want to collaborate and they don't want to join strengths because people are worried that their income could go down or that they might not be the belle of the ball if they show up someplace, and meanwhile the bad guys are circling the damn wagons. Now, they're not stupid. They know that there's no collaboration taking place, but that statement was not meant for black consumption. It was meant for white consumption. Not only are these crazy niggas with guns out there, and there's crazy niggas with hatchets out there in Queens, why, they're all going to start joining together. I'd like to see the proof that we're joining together. And why did I just say we? Because of the end of that statement. This may lead to an increase in BIE group memberships, collaboration among BIE groups, or the appearance of additional violent lone offenders motivated by BIE rhetoric. Now, here's the problem. Nowhere in this report do they give an example of a source of supposed black identity extremist rhetoric. Nowhere in here do they say, hey, this person is an example of black identity extremism. They never say that of extremist rhetoric. They never give an example so you can say, okay, if I hear this type of rhetoric, according to the FBI at least, this is black identity extremism. They never give an actual example. They just leave this wide open to interpretation. But they never say this person over here, this is an example of black identity extremist rhetoric. So you see, when they say that a person is motivated by it, but never give an example of what it is, then that could mean anybody saying anything, anywhere, at any time, for any reason. Because they've never said, by the way, this is it. It will just be, hey, if we say that what you said was black identity extremism, then that's it. If we say it is, because we're that white-dominated society that we told you doesn't exist. Isn't it amazing? They tell you that white dominance doesn't exist, and then immediately put out a report where they say, by the way, if we say you're an extremist, you are. So they say white dominance doesn't exist, and then they start labeling people with the power of white dominance. You're an extremist if we say you are. Well, why don't you give us a unified definition that we can rely on? Give us an example. We'll let you know if you say something that we say is extremism. You just keep talking. We'll let you know. Why don't you give me a past example? Ain't got one just yet, but keep talking. When you say it, we'll let you know. We'll let you know you've done too much. Now, listen to this next part. Possible indicators for BIEs posing a violent threat to law enforcement include advocating for violence against law enforcement. Never explains what that means. It never goes into any detail. Advocating for violence against law enforcement. What does that mean? They don't say. Violent anti-white rhetoric. Well, now we all know from the history of the Black Panthers that if you say that you will not accept white violence against you, that is what they consider to be anti-white rhetoric. That if you say you will not accept white supremacist violence, then that's anti-white rhetoric. We learned that with the Panthers and the Nation of Islam. If you refuse to accept their violence, then by definition, you're the problem. Doesn't matter that the guys they're talking about are the ones with the guns. The white separatists, they're the ones with the guns. The FBI, they're the ones with the guns. Aryan Nation, they're the ones with the guns. The sovereign citizens, they're the ones with the guns. The alt-right, they're the ones with the guns. Black people are out there in the damn streets getting their heads beaten open. We don't have a weapon anywhere, but somehow you're equivalent. Next, they say attempts to acquire illegal weapons or explosives and affiliations with others in both the BSE and sovereign citizen extremist movements. So they just told you that possible indicators of BIEs posing a violent threat are advocating for violence against law enforcement, violent anti-white rhetoric, attempts to acquire illegal weapons or explosives, and then this last part, affiliations with others in both the BSE and sovereign citizen extremist movements. So that last one is gang affiliation. Why, if you even converse with someone that we say is part of one of these movements, then that is an indicator that you pose a violent threat. They just said it. Everything I told you at the beginning with this last part here, they just confirmed it. That even if you associate with any of them, that alone constitutes a violent threat. We don't need to see or hear anything else. Nothing else need be heard. Nothing else need be seen. If you associate with any of these people, you constitute a potential violent threat. Not even potential. It's possible indicator that it's like if you got cancer, you got swollen lymph nodes, that's a sign of cancer. Hey man, you associate with those groups, you're a potential terrorist, man. Yeah, we're on you. We're on you. This is a possible indicator that you're a terrorist. You're a possible terrorist. But we don't have any guns, we don't have any bombs. Doesn't matter. Your thoughts are the weapon. Get that through your heads, people. You see, to be white and extremist, you have to go kill a few dozen people. To be black and an extremist, your thoughts are the weapon. If your thoughts are out of control, that constitutes a weapon. That constitutes a threat. If your very thoughts are no longer within our ability to control, we are going to declare that this constitutes a violent threat. If you even think the wrong thing. Now, you had white supremacists out there in Charlottesville saying blood and soil. You will not replace us. You will not replace us. Carrying guns, shooting guns. You had one member of the Klan out there who literally opened fire into a crowd. You had one guy drove his Dodge Charger over a bunch of people. And they're telling you that if you do not think the way we want you to, that by itself constitutes a possible indicator that you are a violent threat. Your thoughts are the crime. Your skin color is the offense. And your mind is the weapon. They're telling you that where white supremacists are concerned, they can shoot hundreds of people in Las Vegas. That's not the greatest threat that they worry about. One black person whose thoughts are not in line with the collective. You are the greatest threat. You are. Now, remember at the beginning of this assessment, I told you all that the words used in this assessment mean things, and that you all would be very well served to keep that in mind for when you start hearing things. Now, here's the appendix. Appendix A, expressions of likelihood. Most of you have never heard this or seen this before tonight. The Black Channel is the first place that you will ever hear it or see it inside of the methodology of the FBI. Phrases such as, this is what the appendix says, expressions of likelihood or probability. Phrases such as, quote, the FBI judges and the FBI assesses, and terms such as likely and probably, they got those in quotations, likely and probably convey analytical judgments and assessments. The chart, because there's a chart on this page, approximates how expressions of likelihood and probability correlate with percentages of chance. The FBI uses likelihood expressions. Furthermore, the FBI does not derive judgments via statistical analysis and will not use expressions of probability to convey uncertainty in external FBI intelligence products. Now, did you hear that last part? Furthermore, the FBI does not derive judgments via statistical analysis. That sounds like a newspaper, so you don't rely on math? Interesting. Now here's the chart. Across the top, it says terms of likelihood. Almost no chance. Very unlikely. Unlikely. Roughly even chance. Likely. Very likely. Almost certainly. Now, here are the percentages that they subscribe to each one of those classifications. For terms of likelihood, how likely something is. Almost no chance, 1 to 5%. That's what when they say almost no chance, it means 1 to 5%. Very unlikely means 5 to 20%. Unlikely means 20 to 40%. 20 to 40% chance. Roughly even chance, 45 to 55%. Likely, 55% to 80%. Very likely, 80% to 95%. Almost certainly, 95 to 99%. So during this report, when they said it is likely that black identity is a threat, the chances they're referring to is 55 to 80% is the chance that it's likely. When they say very likely, they say that the 80 to 95% chance. Now, remember before when I said probable? Remember before when I was saying that? Terms of probability: remote, 1 to 5%. Highly improbable, 5 to 20%. Improbable, 20 to 45%. Roughly even odds, 45 to 55%. Probable, 55 to 80%. Highly probable, 80 to 95%. Nearly certain, 95 to 99%. Now, there are a ton of annotations at the end of this report. They got a bunch of them in here. But what you need to know and what you need to be aware of is that the threat is real. They're not playing. They're not joking. They've got their ducks lined up. They've had them lined up for decades. I have warned you all since the very beginning. They killed our fathers for less than we're doing here. And that they were not going to let you, the children, get out of control if they could avoid it. Because black people are the only people who cannot achieve honorary or pretend white status. Every other group can. We are the only ones who cannot. Which means that, therefore, your very existence constitutes a growing threat. If you do not get up every day and do like Clarence Thomas and Roland Martin and Sheriff David Clark and the rest of their kind, if you're not one of them, you are a threat. And the FBI has now officially acknowledged that if you identify as black, you don't identify as American, you don't identify as a good little citizen. If you identify yourself as black, you constitute a potential terrorist threat. I have a few more things I want to go over here. I'm going to open up the telephone lines briefly if you want to give us a call, because I really don't want this to be a long broadcast, because I'm going to upload this tonight. I'm not going to edit this. I'm not going to do any of the things I usually do. I'm going to upload this tonight and get this out there tonight. But if you're interested in calling, the telephone number is 646-787-1933. That is 646-787-1933. If you're an FBI agent and you want to refute this, telephone lines are open. If you're a white supremacist and you want to refute this, telephone lines are open. If you are a coon, bedwench, stupid, sloppy mammy, and you're upset about this because, hey, y'all keep talking like that and y'all's going to mess up my Section 8 benefits, you can give us a call. My next statements here are for to whom it may concern. The previous presidential administration, Mr. Obama, did not like several of the things I said on this broadcast. And he made it very clear before he left office, through some of my business interests, that he didn't like what I said. And I'm not going to go into detail about it. He was just that slick with it. I can't really go into detail, but he made it very clear that he didn't like what I said. And he made it very clear that he could make things difficult for me. So, message received. I can't say it's going to stop me, but message received. I got your point. You didn't like what I said. I got it. I heard it. I saw it. And I'm still here. Now you have your buddy, Trump, is in office. And understand something, people. When Donald Trump leaves office, listen to me. There will be, not there might be, there will be a picture of President Trump, President Obama, President George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, if he's still alive, all standing together. There will be, not there might be, there will be a photo like that. There's one out there now with Bill Clinton and Obama and George W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, and one with just one a little more recently, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama. So much for the W. Bush years being so terrible. So much for him being persona non grata. So much for that. Don't you let these people fool you. Don't let them fool you. You will see it. I'm going to open up the phone lines here and take a few calls. Do not call in if you don't want to talk to the host. The telephone lines are not for listening. If you're on the line and you just want to listen, hang up and go to Ustream. The phone lines are for callers to the host only. Caller from 216, you're on live with the Black Channel.
Yeah, what's going on, Jason? This is Derek calling from Cleveland.
Derek from Cleveland, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was just reading about this black identity extremist topic that's going on. And this is basically the government trying to silence the voices of truth, justice, black pride, black empowerment. And it's COINTELPRO 2.0 all over again. And
but you know what my problem with that is, brother?
To me,
here's my problem. And tonight, I just got to say it like it is. My problem is that we have had very few of the individuals from that era who were most affected. I have tried to contact several of the Panthers to get them to speak about this. They won't. Some of them are trying to make money. Some of them are off on LGBT movements. They'll show up for that. But when it comes to speaking against this administration openly, I'm afraid that either a bunch of them have been cowed into cowardice and submission, or that they're showing their true stripes and they were never really with us to begin with. And we've had that before. Angela Davis, Lane Brown, we've had that before. But I'm sad to say that many of the people who are the first victims of COINTELPRO, and COINTELPRO never went away. There was never a government edict that has been decommissioned. It changed forms. but they never outlawed COINTELPRO or its tactics or the motives behind it. That's the other thing. They have never declared that the motives behind COINTELPRO were illegal. You will never find a government document, judgment, or anything that says, by the way, COINTELPRO's tactics and motives, the motives behind it, were illegal. Nothing. And I'm sad to say, in a couple of months, I'm going to name names. I have to. Because I'm not going to have you all out, and if they try to deny it, I will show the emails and the messages. But everybody who wants to be on their own, you're not going to sit here and criticize this report and try to act like there's some united group. If you're by yourself, I'm going to let the world know you're by yourself. If you are with the people, the world is going to be aware that you're with the people. But if you are saying I'm going to sit up here and coast off of my history and COINTELPRO doesn't exist, these young people need to have the institutional knowledge of the previous generations handed to them so that we can effectively and correctly connect the dots. But if the previous generations are too cowardly, too preoccupied, too disorganized to speak on it, we don't have our own intelligence apparatus. And without that, no wonder we can't be effective.
Yeah, that's true. And you said young people. I'm a young person. I'm 21. I'm an undergraduate student. And I noticed a lot of older black people, they just given up. They have completely given up. For example, when I was in school one time, it was early in the morning before my class started, this older black lady came up to me, and I don't know her from anywhere. She just came up to me. I was actually listening to a Tariq Nasheed broadcast, and she just came up and stopped. She like, hey, what you doing? I'm like, listening to a broadcast. And she was like, oh, what's this about? I'm like, it's a guy, Tariq Nasheed, who I listen to, and, you know, he talking about NFL protests or whatever. She was like, oh, so you agree with that? I'm like, absolutely, I agree with that. And when I tell you, Jason, she literally went on a whole rant, basically explaining how the NFL protest was wrong and how the police is justified in killing us. She was like, well, sometimes y'all got to understand, when the police say, don't move. And I had to get on her case early in the morning. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, there's video of police literally executing us out here in the streets. And you sitting here you being a racism apologist. You say, you're not being a racism apologist. And then I was like, and I even broke it up to her. I'm like, and if that's the case, I mean, there's white males who's literally holding up guns to the police and they're not getting killed. Hell, they can take them in alive. But she said that's not true. And she even lied. She was just telling bold-faced lies. She even said Donald Trump never called the white supremacists very fine people and never called NFL players son of a bitches. Like, she was walking off because she didn't want me to give her them facts. And
what you found was a coon.
She just kept walking off while she was saying.
You encountered a coon.
You say what?
You encountered a queen coon. That's what you encountered. That's what you ran into. You ran into a coon.
And she, yes. Like, and she came to me cooning, though. Like, she came to the wrong one. She thought I was about to be a shucking and jiving nigga. Like, no, I was getting in her ass. She even had to tell me to calm down. I'm like, no, like you're not about to be cooning around me. I have zero tolerance for coonery, especially at this point in time where we're at right now in America.
Now, how old about would you say she is?
She is about her early 60s.
Wow. Which means she's old enough to damn well know better. And what does that tell us? First of all, this is something that's going to be very difficult for you to wrap your head around. But I want you to understand this. I'm not a young man anymore. Haven't been for a while. But you are. And those in your 20s, especially your early 20s, you are. And you all, the young people, you are the battlefield of the future. The next generation is won or lost with you. And everybody is going to try to put their bid in as early as they can. Now, they need to brutalize you. They need to rape you. They need to kill you. They need to exploit you. And they can't stop doing it The only thing that they can do is try to force you into ignoring it. And that's what all of their energies are concentrated towards. Forcing you, Derek, to ignore it. That, yeah, this is going on, but it's just perception that the police, I just saw gun somebody down. That's just my perception that was racist violence. And the fact they're not doing it to white folk at the rate they're doing it to black people, that's just your perception. That's your belief. Well, yeah, you got it on video, but you allege that's what the video shows. I say that the video shows that Walter Scott ran and tripped and fell into the bullets. And it's only coincidental that Michael Slager was actually shooting at pheasants. He saw some pheasants nearby, and it's just coincidental that Walter Scott fell backwards on the bullets. This is the kind of insanity that they're saying. Not because they want you to believe it, they want you to just not resist. This is literally like raping someone. Now, what does a rapist want you to do? Does a rapist want you to have sex with him? No. He is here to commit a violent act of dominance and power over you. He simply wants you to not resist what he's doing. He doesn't care if you like it. He doesn't care if you enjoy it. He doesn't care if you thrill in it. He doesn't care if you hate it. He doesn't care if it hurts. He doesn't care if you despise it. No matter what you feel, the reaction is you do nothing to resist. And as a young person, everybody is trying to condition you to wipe out the ideological progress and the ideological gains of individuals like myself, Dr. Claude Anderson, the legacy of Malcolm X. They want you to kill it because they thought it was dead in the 60s. They thought this is it. We killed all of them. It's over. And now it's bigger and more powerful than it's ever been. And worse, it's decentralized. They can't point to one individual and say, he's the one. They can't point to another Dr. King. It has been spread out and decentralized now. And now for them, that means that this is the deadliest thing that could possibly happen. We can't just go kill one person and watch it wither. It has caught on in the popular consciousness. So we need to convince the young sprouts that they don't want to subscribe to this. And they've got plenty of black folk out there who are agents. Agent doesn't necessarily mean you're employed. They have been psychologically colonized. And brother, what she was expressing to you was that she's been colonized. Here's a concept that you all need to understand. Young coons become old coons. You see, when she was your age, True. At 21, she was white ass kissing. She was the swirler of her generation. Now, she may not want to brag about it today, but she was out there following up behind anything Caucasian she could get a hold of. She probably went to she was the ghetto gagger of her generation. Quiet as kept. She ain't gonna talk about it with you. She's not gonna say it. But there's some white dudes out there who saw her naked back when seeing her naked would have been interesting. Today it would just be bizarre. But she was there. She knows. She saw it. She lived it. She was doing it then, before you had the internet and social media to document them. You see, today we can document the people who do it. Back then, she could bury it and conceal it a lot better. And see, at your age, you don't know any of the people from her age group or any of her associates who could tell you, man, she was kissing these white boys' asses when she was your age. She's just gotten older with it. None of them white men kept her, but she's married to the game at this point. Brother, when you spent your life cooning, you can't go back to black society because she's got too many people who know she's not true to the game. So she can't do that. So she gets a hold of some young fella who doesn't really know her past, but she opens up her mouth and starts expressing it. She was trying to colonize your mind the way that hers has been. That's how dangerous this is. They believe in going after the children. They believe in going after the young. They absolutely believe it. They wouldn't have it any other way.
That's exactly what I thought. when she first came to me, or after the encounter, I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, these old coons is trying to keep the younger generation on the plantation. They fighting hard. They fighting harder than the white supremacists to keep us on the plantation, and it's just not going down. Our generation, it's not going down with our generation, like, period, point blank.
What she was saying to you was that your resistance is making things tough on her. Y'all need to stop with all that protesting and saying white supremacy is a problem. You see, I'm old, and I got to answer to these white folk where I'm at. You making things tough on me because you won't accept the programming. You making it hard on me. And you have to understand, that's it. She gets along with them white folk, and they start asking her questions. The way she talked to you is how she talked to them. And what she's saying is there's not enough of you going along with the program to stop constituting a threat to the people that she wants to be associated with. That's what she's telling you. That too many of you are going along.
Yeah, and I even told her, I was like, I hope you don't have any children. I pray. Like, I was actually going in on her. Like, I didn't really want to, and it was interesting though, because it was a white chick right up, like 2 desks up front of me. She was studying on her computer, and I was just going in, and she had to leave because that's how loud I was. Like, I literally was like raising my voice. I can't help it. Once I get in when I start getting mad, I just start getting louder. And I told her, I'm like, I hope you don't have kids and whatever. And she walking away, and then she was like, the truth will set you free. And then I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm not a slave like you. And I know she heard me, but because I said it loud and clear, like, yep, and I know. So, yeah, she was terrible, dude.
History lesson. Black people need to be very clear about our history. On the plantations, it wasn't the overseers that kept the young black men in line. Understand that. It was not the overseers that spoke every day and rationalized away the brutality of the slave masters. It was the old black women, the mammies, the ones who were allowed in the house to cook and clean before they got their asses booted out back to the slave quarters. It was the old black women. You right in the chat room, Big Mama, the mammy. It was the old black women who would calm down the bucks when he was getting ready to do what the hell a man is supposed to do and split that racist bastard's head open. When it's time to go Nat Turner, it'd be the old women. The women who you remember as a child, these are your mother figures. And your mother figure is telling you, you've relied on her wisdom your entire life. And now she's telling you that her wisdom says, don't resist. You gonna make trouble. You be good. Be good means accept the violence. What she really meant is you gonna make it hard for me to get back in this house because you see, every time you all have an uprising, Master starts looking at everybody. He was patting me on the head and patting me on the booty yesterday. Now he's like, look here, you dumb nigger wench. Your ass is gonna be back out there in that field if you don't keep the rest of them in line. There were always more females in the house than males. Massa wasn't gonna have a bunch of men running around his house. He'd get 1 or 2 old men. They're old and elderly and rickety, and it's unlikely he can swing that machete with the force it needs to be. So not going to have a bunch of young black men. You're not going to have any young black men in the house unless you got to have them. And you are not going to have any sizable numbers of black males in the house at all. You are not going to have a family of 5 white people. You got the dad, maybe 1 son, and 3 black males in the house. That's a damn threat. That's a damn threat. And this is what they did then, and what she just showed you is that the mammy of the plantation is alive and well and still working. And by the way, every white coworker and every white person at that job knows, at that place, knows the exact same thing. They know it, and that's why they're happy with her. She'll keep the young bucks in line. We know that she hates blackness more than us. That's why we let her stay as long as she's been here. How else do you think a black person can stay at a white institution for any real length of time unless you're one of them? You cannot be a threat to the institution and simultaneously be allowed to stay long-term at the institution. Those two things contradict themselves. They contradict themselves. I'll let you have the last word.
Hey, but don't you think, okay, my last thing is the fact that the federal government is implementing this fake targeting of non-existent black identity extremists, that's just indicative of how impactful new black media has been, and just black society has been overall in fighting back and controlling the narrative. And that's the first thing I thought. I'm like, oh yeah, well, we making our presence felt. So now they're desperate, and they know this is their last dance. They know they're dying out, so they going all in. It's like, hell, we can't have the world. Nobody can have the world, and that's that. Just keep fighting and keep pushing back. Stay on code. Keep building, and that's it. Black first.
Black first, brother. But let us not be deceived. They are not dying off. This idea that they're going to disappear one morning, that is not going to happen. The idea that they're going to disappear over an extended period of time, that's not going to happen either. This is going to be the status quo going forward. That's what we have to deal with. But don't rely on the idea that, well, they're on their way out. South Africa showed you what the model is going to be for the future. A white minority that is the socioeconomic majority. That's the goal. Caller from 803, you're on live with the Black Channel.
Hey, brother, this is Brian from Atlanta.
Brian from Atlanta, what's on your mind?
Two things I wanted to back up or expound on that you were saying. One, the first thing you was pointing out that the Panthers was kind of on some coon stuff. Like, I watch a lot of, like, Khalid Muhammad stuff, and I did some research on them, and they were never really black first. Like, they were always on this socialist, Karl Marx, white idealism stuff. So I'm not surprised that they're all on this, gay lives matter type of stuff, because they were never really, on board. They were
where Khalid, slow down. Where Khalid Muhammad is concerned, Khalid Muhammad, as far as I'm concerned, is beyond reproach. So I'm not sure where you're getting that from. Just because somebody identifies as...
what I'm saying...
Okay, slow down.
No. Me too.
Excuse me.
Me too. That's what I'm saying. Like, they were attacking him when he was head of the new Black Panther Party. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. They're suspect.
A person can be a communist.
That's what I'm saying.
A person can be a communist or a socialist. I don't really, even though I don't believe in any of those things, you can believe in that and be about black empowerment. Although I don't know how you're going to get there without money. But you can be against white supremacy. Let me say it like that instead. You can be against white supremacy and be a socialist, a communist, a transcendental meditationist. You can be your economic philosophy doesn't mean you're against white supremacy. I don't think you're going to be very effective without money. I don't see how you're going to be a communist and be effective against white supremacy, but you can definitely be against it. As far as the original Black Panthers, because Khalid Muhammad came with the resurgence. I'm talking about the original from Oakland. My problem, I got some problems with what I've seen from there. And I know that I know for a fact with Bobby Seale, he had identified himself as a humanist. And we got to watch out for these people running around identifying themselves as anything other than black. Once you start saying other terms and start trying to deflect and divert off into intersectionalist and humanist, you are doing everything you can to say, well, it's not about being black. And there's where the problem comes in. when we start introducing new things, no, we need to stay focused. Black is enough. And you want to get away from black because you don't really feel comfortable with it. And what we're doing is not something that is intended for individuals dealing with their emotional problems, with their psychological dispositions, their emotional inadequacies. That is not what this is for. That's not what we're about. We are not about individuals dealing with their personal emotional issues. We are about black people getting the yoke of white supremacy off of our backs. And when you start coming in with other agendas, that's a problem. And I'm just going to say, I'm not putting people on blast, but here in a few weeks, I will make it clear the folk I've spoken to and what they said. Not because I'm being messy. I don't do public drama. I never have and I never will. What I will do is make it very clear that, hey, this, to everybody listen, this is what happened when I contacted these people. This is what they said. And I'm not really one for divulging personal discussions, although it's not really a personal discussion because they didn't ask for it to be, so I won't do that. If it were something I thought was confidential, that would be one thing. If there was a situation where I've conversed with these people, I now understand that, you know, I'm against drama, but I keep seeing people's names come up, and I'm not going to sit here and allow what I do to be a place where people think I'm supportive when I know that these people are not on board with us. I know they're not. And I named Professor Todd Boyd. I'm not putting him on blast. I'm saying, by the way, he had no problem talking to white media that nobody had ever heard of. But when it was time to talk to us, all of a sudden, oh, he doesn't have time. Because at first he said we can do it. And then at the last minute, when it was time to talk to him, all of a sudden, oh, schedule change. Can't really do it right now. Get back with you later. And never said anything. I'm not putting him on blast because I'm being mean. I'm saying you all saw them OJ documentaries and other things he said. Yeah, he sounds one way on television, but those comments apparently are calibrated for a specific type of audience. And he's afraid. He's showing at the end of the day, yeah, he's afraid of upsetting his white masters too. I'll let you have the last word.
Oh, yeah, brother. I just wanted to say everything you said, I pretty much agree with. I wasn't, in fact, that's what I was saying. I was agreeing with you about the Panthers and, you know, because they was attacking colors. Because I was saying that the Panthers are suspect because they're on that communist stuff and they put class first, not black first, and like you were saying. And the only other thing I wanted to add on was when you were saying about how, you know, white supremacy wants you to get you to just accept it, not lying down to how these older coons. That's why they're always saying stuff whenever you're calling out racism. Oh, it's not racist because I disagree. That's them saying, trying, like you said, trying to always make it seem like it's about an agreement or it's about a perception. No, this is about white supremacy and black people surviving. That's it, brother. Black first.
Black first, thank you very much for giving us a call tonight. This is them saying that a black person talking is the same as a white person shooting. That's what they're saying. A black person talking is exactly the same as a white person opening fire with an automatic weapon. So now they want you to be afraid. The very idea that black people can speak freely, that is now being labeled as a physical threat. Black people's words are now being called a physical threat. Amazing. Caller from 516, you're on live with the Black Channel.
Good evening, this is Patrick, and I'm calling from Long Island.
Okay, you say Patrick from Long Island?
Yes.
And what's on your mind, Patrick?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, with this FBI so-called report, this is the FBI and the government basically declaring an open race war on black people. That's all that this report is. This is an open declaration of war on black people. And understand, and I'm sure you understand, and most of the listeners, the program understand that this is what they're going to use to justify harming black people at a higher rate. No, this is, in other words, this is the I'm white and I say so theory.
They're now going to say that we opened fire on this guy because he was a part of a Facebook group. That's what they're going to be saying now. That it was justifiable for police to open fire on someone simply because he was a member of a Facebook group. If he was part of a Facebook group that we didn't like, then they're going to say now that just because, remember, before now they've been using really draconian measures. Before now they've been saying that if you ever got a speeding ticket, why? The police killed Eric Garner and, well, they had multiple arrests. Okay, what about Philando Castillo? Well, he had all of these parking tickets. That was what the media said. Look at all these parking tickets that he had. He had parking tickets. And then when they ran out of those with other people, well, you know, his Freddie Gray. Well, yeah, I mean, well, his mom was a heroin addict. What the hell's that got to do with the police did to him? Well, I mean, you know, his mom was a heroin addict. You just need to be aware. I just thought I'd mention that. Now, if you have never encountered law enforcement in any way, shape, form, fashion, or manner, this tells you that they're targeting the young black people who have not been alive long enough to encounter law enforcement in a negative way, if you can get to adulthood without that. They're now going to say, for example, could you imagine if Tamir Rice had gone to a Moorish Science Facebook group? Why, they would be saying, well, you know, he liked to go to Moorish Science Facebook groups. Trayvon Martin, you know, he liked to watch Moorish Science videos. You know, he was part of that Black Empowerment BE thing, you know. That's what Trayvon Martin was doing. No, he didn't have a criminal record, but he was a bad